This is the INKPULP podcast.
For the show.
Yeah.
Look at you, dude. You look so professional right now.
Do I? Why? Because of the camera? Oh, I got a key light now over
I
here.
know.
I look lit better.
Yeah,
Wait,
buddy. That is a professional looking setup.
The lighting on you is very warm. Maybe
Yeah.
I didn't set it warm. Maybe I set it cold.
That and I got better skin than you. Don't forget.
Yeah, that's true. But I got a little sun today. Let me check my light. I wasn't sure which way to go with the. No, it looks. I could go brighter. I'm cool.
There it is.
Ooh, there we go. Now tell me brightness wise. Here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. There you go.
There it is. There it is. We don't even have to talk anymore. We can just call it quits. We're done.
We're done. We achieved maximum awesome look.
we crossed the threshold of perfect aesthetic, and now we're here now.
No, I need to get a better camera stand so that I can have it placed just slightly better. It's a minor adjustment. I'm not rushing to do so.
You're a kooky kid. What is your preference? That you're looking directly into camera?
No, it's if I'm more comfortably sitting close to my mic and computer, I'm cut off, so I have to go back. And
you want that whole shot of you with like the torso because you've been working on that for.
No, I don't. I want like I want your shot. You have a nice like.
My shot is
like
exactly like. Yeah, my shot is like. Wait. Why don't you just scooch forward closer to the camera? What happens?
I get cut off.
At your head?
Yeah.
Shawn, you got a head of hair. I don't. That's the...
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, fair enough.
You want the full shot of your head. Is that what you're saying? The full visage. You know what?
No,
you act humble. You act like it. There's things about you.
When do I act humble?
Like just generally, you're like, hey, I want to conduct my life in the most mindful, self-aware way possible. But man, oh man, sometimes your narcissism just can't help itself.
I'm a Gemini. What do you want from me?
Bubbles to the freaking surface. Like,
no, look, you've got a nice shot. I'm just trying to be like you, Eric. That's all. I'm trying to be like you.
Maintain that shot because that's what works for you. The microphone's picking you up great. Camera is like, picking up that entire room, creating a really, really nice bokeh effect. And then you've got the lighting down now. So
yeah, you're right. You know what? You've convinced me. I'm good.
I don't think I have. I think next time you'll be like, I gotta.
No, you have.
It looks good. I mean, let it be as unintrusive as possible. You know what I mean? It's a casual conversation. This is
sure.
This is in lieu or in line with that theme. What's next? How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
How are the project coming? How am I doing? Always busy. There's always conversations on how to best optimize time. That's the concept, right? That's the theory. And then there's the reality of how time plays out, or my schedule and what's accessible to me.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
We can talk about time management if you want, because that's a crazy amount of like brain power that I feel like there's some artists who don't know how to do it, right? They don't necessarily have an understanding of well, actually, you know what? Depending on where I was in my life and in my career, I had less of an understanding. And the further along I get, which is, I'm an old man. So the further along I get, I have a better understanding of how to optimize for my time. I still lose control of it from time to time, but for the most part, and that time management, really does reflect towards what you decide to pick up as far as work is concerned.
Right. So explain what you mean in terms of when you say time management. You mean how much time you're actually spending on work versus life stuff?
Yeah. Or how much time you're actually spending on not just work, but the amount of time that goes into you drawing a page or you drawing an image. It's not to say we should be led always by the finances of something, but when you take on an assignment, there's an expectation there, not just from a oh, I'm going to draw. I think that was my problem back in the day. Is I just wanted to wow you every time. Right, because I felt like, and it may be true, but it's not the only factor that should have gone into consideration. Which is, every time I wanted my work out there, I wanted to just like wow you with it.
Sure.
Maybe that speaks to a level of like insecurity on my part, or I knew that if I wowed you with it, I was under this weird misconception that it could potentially, that's going to be the one more sort of stone in the pathway that leads to more work. You know what I mean?
I think, I understand what you're saying about ego, but I think it's more that, it's comics is like, when you get into like Marvel and DC comics and working for those publishers, and you're looking at down the road at a long career, it's shark infested waters.
Yeah.
And you wanna shine. You don't just want to get by. That's what I feel like I always did. I always got by, and I never shined. So I was never able to like rise to the cream.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun place to be. So I understand that. There's some insecurity in it, probably for me. I can't speak for you, but it was more about getting to a more elite position where I could work on books that I really enjoyed working on, and paid better and got better royalties, and page sales were better. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I think it's similar. I think I was walking along those similar lines of like just trying to produce the best artwork, because again, it to your point, is like these shark infested waters. I think the way I saw it was just like I needed to have some sort of mechanism that allowed me to believe that there was longevity in the job.
Right.
And there's a handful of things that I could control, one of which was the quality of my work. Right. But often that got in the way of just like enjoying the process.
Yes.
Right. Often, I think that's one of the things that I kind of turned off in my head back when I was producing stuff for mainstream, was I wasn't really enjoying it. I was sort of using it as a one more portfolio for another portfolio piece for the next job, rather than, dang, I had a lot of fun drawing that,
Right.
And that was that lack of clarity, that lack of awareness when I was making that decision led me down the path of taking on work that I wasn't really into, right? It was just because I wanted to find a way to continue employment. I believed that I wanted to be in that mainstream space all the time. And
right.
more like the promise of, actually it was more like this picture that I had in my head, right? Of like wanting to be like a Bill Sienkiewicz or a Jim Lee, or somebody that was relevant, those guys that I held in high regard, and really losing track of what got me there in the first place, which is like having fun,
When did you get back to having fun, or did you get back to having fun?
I know that I'm having fun now.
Yeah, I figured they would say that. But what about Iron Man?
It's not any less work. It's not any less grueling. But at the very least, I'm having fun. And initially, you hear people this is almost verbatim to what people are like. Oh, the moment you start working on your own work, then you're gonna have fun. That's not exclusively true, right? It's also a mind shift, right? I think given mainstream work, I could have fun. Right? But it has to fall under a ton of different, well, not a ton, but like a short list of like what interests me, like a short list of categories. What interests me? What is my time allowing for? You know what I mean? Because the moment you're like, oh, I want to do a 5-issue miniseries, and you only got like X amount of time to do it, somewhere near the end of that, when you're just like, I'm way over what what I'd rather be doing, whatever that is, whether it be like personal time or just like, not doing that thing. And it starts to really bog down on you and you're not having fun doing it anymore,
Right.
So I think that's one. It's like I really shifted my focus and like this interests me. I'm having fun doing it. It's daunting, right?
Sure.
But I know that the leading mechanism, the leading compass is informed by a true north that is like, whoa, this is still enjoyable. I love drawing this. And I think in part that's what led me down the path of enjoying drawing comics again. Right? Because somehow in the subconscious I associated drawing comics as like not fun. Because I attached like a page rate to it. I attached a dollar symbol to it. I attached like all the baggage that came with working in less than ideal situation and working with like less than ideal people, which I don't mean to project on them. I chose that, right? Like I said, hey, I'm going to try this.
Right.
Only to come to find out that it's a nightmarish situation. So it's a lot of that factoring into what I reflect on now to be like, oh wow, I'm staying up late, I'm getting up early, but I really, really like drawing. And it just happens to be I'm drawing my own stuff,
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I want to get there. I want to feel that. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
how many hours of sleep do you average a night?
By design, I try to get at least 6.
Okay, and 6 is good for you.
Yeah. I wake up, depending on what I did the night before, depending how grueling my workout is, depending on obviously like the food I eat. This is the kind of stuff that you're paying attention to when you're my age, like
your age. I'm older than you.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but
dude, when this comes out, when this episode comes out, it's gonna come out the day after I turn 50.
Holy cow! So you're a few steps ahead of me. It is to say that all of those things impact how I feel the next morning. And so 6 typically works depending on how hard I went the previous day. I'd come to find that even under the most grueling physical activity, whether it be like running around the house and trying to catch up with my kids or whatever, it doesn't hold a candle to when I have a really rough day mentally, psychologically. Right? When there's a ton of stuff on my calendar that's like, I'd rather not do that, but I know how important it is. My brain has to go and engage a different set of muscles, like this is a meeting day, this is a sync day with, at least 5 people, So yeah, no, 6 is good for me. What do you try to clock in whenever you're sleeping?
I was getting 7. And,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, but
that's a luxury to me.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, dude, there was a time where I was getting between 5 and 6.
Okay.
But I found it to affect me negatively. Yeah. Lately, I've been at 7. I started to feel it too, and I never let myself just sleep to see what I truly needed. And so this week I did that. Like I set my alarm for 7, but I've gotten up before my alarm every day.
Right.
So, and I get to bed around 10:30. So
same here.
It seems to be that at 8 hours I'm good. But actually this is a bad week to run that test. I'm under a lot of mental stress. So I think that's why I need the extra sleep now. I would love to get back to getting up at 5 again. And I mean, I can. I worry I'll start cracking again.
My attitude, I've never set an alarm. My brain just wakes up at a certain time, right? Typically, I'm up at like 5:30 and I have to literally like, so what I do is I don't set the hard deadline for myself of like 7 hours, 8 hours, right? If my brain wakes up, then my brain wakes up, right? This is just me, right? So
right. Yeah.
And I take, I take stock on how I'm feeling right then, and if it happens to be that I need to sleep in a little bit, I allow myself that because nothing is so, unless it's really super pending, unless there's something really on my calendar that needs immediate attention. But up at 5:30, I don't know if there's too many things that early in the morning that require my immediate attention, especially if
Right.
I'm feeling like, hey, I could use a little bit more time. So I do my best to just pass out. The
Right.
one thing I don't do is I used to wake up and just like grab my phone. Did you ever do that? Like
Um,
I put my
I don't keep
phone.
my phone near where I sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
moved
I
it.
I, I actually do, right? Because I want to get into the habit of, just because it's near me, basically developing the willpower to not like immediately go for it.
Right.
Some people are like, oh, I leave it downstairs so I don't have to
Hmm.
deal with it. That's a good sort of mechanism, right? But for me, I leave it right next to the bed because now I'm like, okay, so it's there. I don't, it's not as tempting as, it's almost like, oh, I never want to buy cake because I'm tempted to eat it. Well, so what happens when you run into cake? You just like shove it into your face,
Right, right. No, that's a good
So
point because I avoid the sweets in the house.
yeah,
And I don't keep it that far, but I understand what you're saying. That
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, going back to the original point of the conversation, which is just like understanding my schedule. I really try to develop one of, for me, what works is if I'm regimented about it. Right, I actively step away from the desk at a certain time of day. Right, I actively step away from the desk when it's at the end of my day. It's rare. It's a rare occasion that I have to stay any longer than I have to, because I can sort of mentally picture what my day looks like. And that is supremely helpful for me to sort of like understand what that is. Now,
Yeah, I
in the
have a full
past,
schedule for every day. Like,
yeah, in the past, I would just kind of roll with, oh yeah, sure, I'll go here, I'll go there. I'm like, and it's not, again, this is just for me, it's not conducive to the best kind of creativity. I find that if I give myself a certain amount of time exclusively doing something, I find that my creativity spikes.
oh wow.
Somehow I feel like, whoa, that feels like I am on right now, and it's almost annoying and disruptive when something gets in the way of that. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
no, I know
like an
exactly what you mean.
unscheduled somebody dropping by or whatever. But
Right.
I never want to deny an opportunity to go hang out with someone. But there are times, again, because I know, I guess it's just you train your brain enough, and you just go like, oh, my creativity spikes. Right, like right now is probably when, no, not this second, but in this block of time that I've set aside for myself is when I feel like I am the most creative, and it's rare that it doesn't kick on. For whatever reason, man, my butt hits the seat, and as soon as I get those first initial emails out of the way, right, then it kicks on, and I'm like, holy cow, I can draw. I feel like I can freaking draw all day, which I've never. It's a new thing. I've never had that. There are times when I don't even
Yeah,
want to look at the drawing pad.
yeah. I feel like I don't have enough time to spend drawing. That's
Mm,
the thing I wrestle with.
yeah,
I'm spending so much time doing other stuff that will hopefully give me the time to draw in the
yeah,
future
yeah,
more.
for sure.
So that's the frustrating thing on my end is I'll sit down to draw and I'll get in the zone, but now I have to go do something. I
Yeah,
have to, my calendar's saying, "Hey, dummy, you got to work on this or that."
yep, yep,
So,
yep. No, it's well, and in as far as that creativity is concerned, in as far, because I feel like the moment I get into that creative space, the only thing I have to refrain from doing is not doing the thing, or going to do the thing that I'm not supposed to be doing. Right? Like, oh man, I would love to digitally paint right now. I would love to, like, I see something online that really super inspires me by way of composition, by way of skin tone, by way of like, whoa,
right,
that's really cool. Like, I
right.
want to go paint that thing digitally because I want to learn how to do it. I want to take these brushes out for a spin. And that's what I mean when I say, like, I have that feeling of just like, man, I'm really inspired to go do something right now.
Yeah, I get that all the time.
Right now, I have to train myself to like take that enthusiasm, take that jolt of inspiration, and point it towards the pages that you're drawing, right? And that
That's hard.
also, I have to sort of like limit myself. I can get there, right? It's not necessarily as automatic as I'd like it to be, and you're right, it's hard. But when I do get there, I'm like, I want to render the crap out of this thing. like, you know what I mean? Like, oh gosh, that's the worst thing to get myself into. is because I know I have so many more pages and I had to sort of like apply the butter of information across multiple slices of toast, you know?
Right, right,
Like I
right.
have to really plan this out and not burn my like it's like it starts to become a diminishing set of returns, and I guess this feeds into what I was doing before when it comes to prioritizing my time when I was working in on comic book pages. And I don't know if you felt the same way, right? Where I would get so like into that page, right? Like this deserves 95% of my attention. These two pages,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. When the
But not
script is good,
realizing
yeah.
those 2 pages are 2%, 3%, 7% of the entire thing that you're working
Right,
on,
right.
right?
Oh, dude,
And
I would get like I'd have one panel. It was probably when I was working on Phantom X Max, but I remember just having like one panel to like set in space, and it was just like a quick like flash memory, but I had to make space look as amazing as I could. And it's like the book didn't even take place in space. I just had to like, here's my shot at drawing space. So
yeah,
I gotta work. I'm gonna do washes. I'm gonna do frisket. I'm gonna do all this stuff. So yeah, you're right. I know
yeah,
exactly what you mean.
I don't know when it started to become almost a prerequisite to labor over comic book pages, right? I can't think of one single sort of like block of time that made people, or at least from the artist's end, because the people are going to digest it and ingest it the way they, you know what I mean? Like, when did artists back in the day decide, hey, we're going to make this the most complex thing ever, the
Uh,
drawing these books, you know? Everybody always points to Brian Hitch, but I think that's a weird crutch, right?
no, I would say it's before that. I'd say it's the boom in the '90s.
What do you think? Like,
I mean, I think part of it is the boom in the '90s that got people, like artists were all of a sudden just drawing the books how they wanted to and wanted them to draw. So for a kid like me, like seeing someone like Joe Madureira come on and feeling all this energy and these big, bold, dynamic shapes, it was
yeah.
like, you know, and he was having fun rendering, and that made me say like it what like I don't know how
Are
to
you
put
sure
it.
that's true?
No, no,
Are you
wait.
sure?
I'm saying from my experience. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
planted the seed. What took me over the edge was Gaijin Studios.
Okay. Okay.
It was discovering what they were doing
Yeah. Yeah.
that sent me down the rabbit hole of like trying to make everything awesome. And when I say Gaijin Studios, I want to say specifically it was
Yeah.
Jason Pearson's Body Bags,
Sure. Sure.
where it was like every mark was, I mean, I know Carl helped inked it a lot, but every mark was razor sharp and
Yeah.
perfect, and
Yeah.
every background was rendered to all hell, and every
Yeah.
character was like drawn perfectly. The acting was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
The composite, and then it was like looking at Stealth Freeze is where I was like, I went down the composition wormhole.
Yeah.
Where I
Yeah.
remember spending some time with him as a student and learning some composition stuff from him, and so it was like the that and then Kevin Nolan,
Sure.
then
Sure.
through Gaijin discovering Kevin Nolan
Yeah.
just sent me into the realm of that.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Nobody. All of those things are valid when you're trying to develop your craft. You know,
Yeah.
like you take a look at back then, and you're like, holy crap, those are exemplary. Like the three you mentioned three, like the three you mentioned are like, I don't know, for that time, for that era, were like godlike people, you know.
Exactly.
But then you take a look at how laborious it is,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
no doubt.
And it's like it's so much work.
But I
And
didn't have anyone telling me like
exactly,
otherwise. But it's
exactly,
funny because around after that, like after a year or two in that wormhole,
yeah,
is when Bruce Timm kind of came on, and I was like, that was my favorite shit too. And
yeah,
actually, I went through a phase where I went super simplified.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember I was banging out pages so fast,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't getting work. Like that's kind of like when I stopped getting work.
Mm.
The good thing is the samples I did for San Diego Comic Con that year. I guess this is probably '99,
Yeah,
maybe 2000. It might have been 2000.
yeah.
Um, I did like an 8-page short story, all silent, all film noirish. And I decided I was going to do a short story, silent story for each of the deadly sins.
Sure.
And so this one was called Silent Wrath. I was dealing with a wrath story,
Yeah.
but so I did it, and I remember Chiarello just fucking loved it.
Sure.
And I was
Sure.
friends with Darwin at the time, and Darwin was like showing me all the stuff I was doing right.
Yeah.
And I showed it to Kevin Eastman just on a whim, and he ended up publishing it in Heavy Metal.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's the good thing that came out of it. And I don't regret having gone down that hole. I learned a lot, and there's maybe I should go back to it. The problem is, I remember I hit a point where I was like, what if I did like Kevin Nolan rendering over Bruce Timm level, like Bruce Timm shape-based drawing? And
those are two contradicting concepts.
But that's how I draw. That's how I draw now.
Is that what you're drawing? Okay, yeah.
I mean, if you look at like
not in both of those cases, right? Those are negating concepts.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking the theories behind why they do what they're doing, they could negate each other. Yeah. But I think visually they can work together.
I believe this really captures the frustrating concept of your development, of your craft climb, because you're constantly, I can make this stuff work, man. I can make.
That's my problem in life.
Strawberry and blueberries, strawberry and
shove
blue cheese.
a round peg into a square hole until it fits. Like that's.
That's what we were talking about before. Oh, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
I was going to say that there, you pointed out something that I think when you're trying to be relevant, and relevant is a very broad word, but when you're trying to be a relevant working artist in comics, right? I don't know why people these days, or at least it's not even unique to recent times. It goes as far back as the people that you sort of cited as like, whoa, those guys are awesome. I've always wanted to be like those guys. I don't know why when the importance of a deadline diminished, because I think as a soft skill, that is really, 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 really important.
Right? I agree. And look, I never missed a deadline. I can firmly say that. So all I did was made myself miserable to meet the deadline.
Right.
I sacrificed everything I could to make that deadline, and lived that way for a long time, and was teaching full time.
Right.
So that was kind of brutal.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think art and I can say this comfortably. Art in comics these days has been so deprioritized.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, to the point where it's all sort of there's a level of homogenized across art.
Yeah.
In mainstream comics.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't think that the people who are hiring the artists know what they're doing.
I agree.
Right? I think they have a general idea of what good looks like. Clearly, it has to speak to them, and there's nothing wrong with that because art's so subjective.
Sure.
Well, oftentimes the guiding principle, at least as I've deciphered it from back then, was that they understood the product. Right, they understood the thing. By they, I mean the editorial offices and the people who would inform on these hires, the people who would make the recommendations to say, "Hey, this is a brand new kid. Throw him a 8-page backup story somewhere, and let's see what his performance is like. Let's see how he works with others. Let's see how he turns in deadlines. Let's see all of these metrics that allow you to get past the 8-page tryout and into mainstream. Let's see how people react to it. Let's see the audience react to it.
Yeah, and also they were under supervision.
Were they?
When they were given, well, I mean, there was I don't know when it ended, but for a while when you got hired from Marvel or DC, you were given an 8-page short in one of their anthologies, like Marvel Comics Presents or DC Showcase. Yep. And the person in charge of those books was Joe Kubert, and the job was to train you on the job.
Yeah.
So you were under supervision in that sense. So you do thumbnails and you get them critiqued, you do them again, and through that you'd learn. And that stopped before my time.
Yeah.
before
Oh, me
your
too.
time, I'm
But I mean,
guessing.
like, but even then, like, in the time that I was working, there were still, I believe that there were still, or maybe there's just, me being naive. I believe there was still an emphasis on art because they understood what they were trying to make. And the reason why I know this is because in the beginning part of my career, there was a reason why I wasn't getting work,
Yeah, me
right?
too. Me too.
Because they couldn't see how my work back then stylistically fit their product. Not
Right.
because they were necessarily looking for a house style, which is also a consideration, right?
Right.
But
Right. Right.
because they understood that these things need to be aspirational and bigger than life and really like clearly understood the kinds of stories that they were trying to tell, these are superhero books for the most part, right?
Right.
And yeah, I didn't fit that mold, right? Which was
Yeah.
frustrating
I
back
didn't either.
then.
I didn't either. Yeah.
Yeah, it was frustrating back then, but now I can reflect back and be like, I understand why. Because I wasn't doing the thing that allowed me to thrive in that particular environment. I was
Hmm.
almost trying to just like, you were talking earlier about trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's that, It's like, I'm going to prove to you that this stuff is applicable for Superman. Are you out of your mind? Like,
Right.
I should
Right.
have never drawn a Superman book. It was more of a more pride and ego that allowed me, and obviously the good graces of those offices, the editorial offices, to give me like a fill-in issue somewhere. And
Hmm.
I should not be surprised why the audience reacted so allergically to the stuff that I was doing back then, because
Right.
they had a preconception, they had an idea of what those books need to look like.
Yeah.
When you inject me into them, right, and I'm not doing those things, they have every sort of like right, I think, as fans of the book, not to say like, they should riot or like be like, send in like death threats, but they had every right to be like, whoa, this isn't what this is,
Right. Right.
right? This art does not fit the kind of stories that we tell here. And I feel like these days, I've seen it, right? I'm like, that doesn't work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I see it all the time. I saw someone today. I don't know this artist, but what caught my eye was their statement. Like, it said, "I would write and draw the shit out of a Wildcat series. Does DC even do anything with Wildcat anymore? DC, send them my way." And I saw the art, and it was bad. And I was like, my first response was like, "Who do you think you are?" And
Yeah,
then I was like,
sure, sure.
"Oh, you're someone working today. I get it." Like, of course you think this.
Yeah, and it's so here's the thing, right? Does that sort of outward emotion, that thing that you're saying, like it's a lot of ego, a lot of like whatever it is that's being broadcast into social media, and in this case, Twitter space, right? Like, is it because the culture of comics has shifted so much? Somebody who is not performing at a specific level believes themselves capable of drawing a Wildcats book.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like me going, like, it's like the NBA lowering their standards so much, or shifting their standards. It's unfair for me to say lower, but let's say if I'm biased, right?
Yeah.
Lowering their standards so much, the NBA is like, I feel like I can be competitive in the sport.
Right. Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
Like, the ego, it must take, like the way you and I are focused on it. That's kind of funny, and that's really super egotistical. But something may have cued them in to think, actually, you may thrive in this space.
Well,
you
I
know?
think I think that's the world we live in now. I think
Mm,
people are growing up with the internet and social media and are just like, I can do whatever I want to do. I can be whatever I want to be. And
mm,
I understand that. I mean, I subscribe to that philosophy to an extent, but the problem is it's a generation where they don't even want to be trained. They just believe it should happen because they think it should be
Are
that
you
way.
saying across the board, like just generally?
Yeah, yeah, not just in comics.
Hmm.
It just seems to be like an attitude on social media that, like, I'm just going to be a millionaire by being on social media, and some people do it,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
it backs up their idea. Like, I don't have to be good at anything. I can just, if I play this social media game right,
Yeah,
I can do
yeah.
whatever I want. And it's like, Sure, someone can become really popular with a YouTube show,
Sure.
make millions of dollars for having no real ability or talent to do anything.
Sure.
And then because of that, now they're in a movie, and now they're writing a
Mm,
comic
mm,
book, and now they're this
mm,
and that. And
mm.
it's
So
like,
you're
why
thinking,
spend the
you're saying,
time? Go ahead.
yeah, you're saying like once that sort of permeates the like sort of a national consciousness, it makes them believe that they have accessibility to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in theory, that makes a lot of sense. Where it doesn't necessarily hold up, like it holds. I don't know. I can't speak for every comic that's being published, but the
Right.
ones that are being highlighted, the ones that are constantly getting sort of the articles in these online shill media publications.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the art and it's rare that I'm like, yeah, that definitely, you are helping to stand up and hold up the Marvel logo, which has a history of like producing these like generation defining series, right?
Right.
It doesn't necessarily hold up in the concept art world though.
No.
They
No.
can, especially in the kind of concept art world that's applicable to like the stuff that people aspire to potentially work on, right? Like, concept artists, the term has been so muddled down that, people don't necessarily even have an understanding of the definition of it anymore. It's just like, yeah, let's just make it as broad as possible because I drew a couple turtles. I'm a concept artist.
Right.
I'm talking about the kinds of concept artists that help make franchises and movies.
Like
right?
Ian McKeg.
The Ian McKegs, right? The Ian McHughes, the Andy Parks who are helping to stand up, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like these are like concept artists, like those guys who are in the spaces to help develop and proof out these giant, super successful franchises.
Right.
I think the bar hasn't. If it's moved, I think it's only moved for the better, right? The thing that
I
they
agree.
obviously have to play up against is how crazy their schedules are, and they obviously have to produce. Like Carla Ortiz, who I can comfortably call my friend and an inspiration. She was a formal painter first. That ended
A lot
up
of them were. A lot of
yeah,
them
like
were.
they had formal training, and
Yeah.
then they go into these spaces and you just excel, There's this guy who is super kind to me, a concept artist named Wes Burt. And Wes is just like incredibly good. Guys like Ryan Lang, they are like establishing like what the bar looks like. And for the most part, when it comes to like the entertainment, the legitimate version of it and the entertainment endeavor of concept art, when you're actually hireable and relevant, that bar hasn't moved. It's actually like great.
Well, let me ask you this: when it comes to the world of concept art, aren't the art directors like the Ian McKegs and the ones like the ones making the choices about who's joining the teams?
I mean, I guess in a way, that's only one part of that's only a component of the overall, culture. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it trickles down from, I guess, in a way, this might not be comprehensive, but it trickles down from there. Those art directors establish a look and quality bar, right? Those things then get out. Right? They're like, oh, so-and-so works on this project, so-and-so works on this project. Look at the pedigree of the things that they're working on. And then from there, that kind of helps establish, well, that's what good looks like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
in a way, it's not exclusively the art director, but it maybe it's one of the starting points, right? But from there, it really does help establish, like, you want to be good in this space. You want to be known as the concept artist du jour, or somebody that's relevant enough to hire. That bar is clear,
Yeah.
and it's very high.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's rare people that I've run into in their body of work where I'm like, that's just, I guess that works as a photo bash or whatever, because probably your deadline allowed for. It's not, it's not ideal. Like it diminishes the exercise when you're just photo bashing stuff. But I don't want to wade into that, shit lake when it's like, oh, is photo bashing legitimate?
What is photo bashing?
Photo bashing is just like you get a bunch of images and photos from the internet, and you just like start slapping them together, blur the lines on where the photo stops and
Man, don't get me started on that one.
Okay.
There's a comic artist who's been hired to do concept art in major film franchises
Yeah.
who all they do is trace photos and photo bash. And I was like, how do you hire someone with no vision to create vision? Like
I don't know. I've heard arguments
baffles me.
for and against, and it's not coming from a illegitimate place, right? It starts
Yeah,
to
I
become
guess like on a conceptual level, the
yeah.
way I always saw it was you need to hire someone to draw something that's never existed before.
Often, but not exclusively.
Okay, but okay, in the world of science fiction and
Sure,
concept art,
sure.
and that's what I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
why does someone who who can't create from scratch get to be in that position to create
Here's one.
something?
Here's one, because sometimes you're just trying to get buy-in from the producers. You're just trying to get buy-in from like the art directors, right? So they give you 10 things that you need to do, right? And you're like, is it easier for me to grab pre-existing things, change them enough so that I can get buy-in, and at the end change it so much so that it's not that thing that I stole it from? That to me is sort of like, you have to going back to the earlier part of our conversation, that to me is understanding what your time management looks like, understanding
Okay.
what your capabilities
But
are.
what I'm talking about is hiring an artist who exclusively does that,
Oh yeah, sure.
who's
Sure.
never
Well,
shown anything but that.
yeah, that's too bad.
Okay. Anyways, I'm derailing your conversation. Keep
Well,
going.
the point that I was trying to make was that concept art as a community, as a sort of like a like the people who are in it, right? They have a defining set of artists that helped and continue to establish, reestablish, and live up to the bar. And when I say the legitimate part of entertainment, I'm talking about like feature film and feature animation, television animation, you know what I mean? Like there's a look to all of those places. Even when you say something like, I laugh at people who are dismissive over things like Rick and Morty, but I
Right.
dare them to draw in that style
Right.
and make it look
Exactly.
consistently
When
and
you
do
work in
something.
animation, you learn very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and do something creative within the context of that style. So people can draw Rick and Morty, right? But if you were to ask them, like, come up with a completely different character and make it sense in that universe, it's so hard, because if you don't have a clear understanding of the tools that you need to employ to make it look like that, right? You're not really a concept artist. You're just a guy who copies Rick and Morty.
Right. Right.
So similarly across the board, so there's a bar that people either meet or exceed and continue to establish, and by doing so, it becomes a really competitive, almost overwhelming field as an artist on the outside looking in. You're like, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, how
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
do that? You know, comics doesn't have that.
Right. Right. Which
Like
baffles me
comics
why
is
they come to comics to hire some of these people.
yeah, it's like comics is so anemic when it comes to it borderlines on embarrassing as
Yeah.
to like the exemplaries that you can point at and go like, it should never fall below this look, this feeling, this level of accomplishment and craft.
Yeah.
And yet there's stuff that gets published where I'm like, why is that? What are you getting with that thing that helps you understand that's the space that only comics can inhabit? And I know there's a lot of people who will defend, who'll be naysayers and who will defend the idea of current illustration in comics. They're like, oh man, comics is open to a lot of interpretations of styles and yada yada. I'm like, I agree. It just should not be on Punisher. It just should not be like,
Yeah.
it just should not be on mainstream comics because it doesn't make sense for its brand, you know?
Right. I agree.
There are certain lanes, and those lanes are predefined, predetermined, and it has a lot to do, its history, right? Its legacy helps to inform it, not necessarily exclusively, but when you break outside of that, there better be a damn good reason why, you know?
Right.
We're coming from a place of, and this is not dating it. this is actually one of the building blocks from it. We're coming from a place of what you described, of like the Adam Hugheses, of like the
Right.
Jason Pearsons, right? Going back, it comes from a place of Bill Sienkiewicz's
Yeah.
and Mobius's, and you know
Yep.
what I mean, of like
Hmm.
your Howard Chaykin's and your Frank Millers and your Jim Lees and your
And
John
John
Byrnes and
Buscema's
like
and all that. Yeah.
all of that helps to inform on it. And it's not to say that you have to continue to copy that look. That's not what I'm getting at all. You actually have to, you can effectively like salad bar the heck out of that, and
Right.
because
Right.
that's what Jim Lee did, right?
Right.
Jim
Oh.
saw like, what is it that really blows people's minds? It's pretty much on brand for Jim, but like it was almost scary how he was able to distill all of these influences
Hmm.
that he was looking at back in the day, and somehow fuse it all together and still manage to elevate the craft, right? And elevate the bar to the point where people started looking at him, going like, "That's the bar that we can't fall behind, or that's the aspirational one
Right.
that we're going to try to meet." Some of us fall short of that, and some of us don't. And there was Jim Lee is not just the exclusive one, but of an age, there were multiple people that were operating in that space. They were like, that's what a good looking book looks like.
Do you? Yeah, I guess I keep looking at more of a macro, like comics being like a micro, and just looking at the world. I feel like we're going through a period of time right now where the history and the traditions are all evaporating across the boards, and it's like this
Yeah.
whole like burn it down, don't like all the people who, I'm not saying it all comes from this, but it's like white men created all this, we have to destroy all of it.
Yes.
And
Is that it? You're saying
well,
white
I mean,
man
I'm overly simplifying. I'm not saying like
That's the
white men did
cartoonish
their
version that you're. Yeah.
right. Yes, yes. White men had played their role in some horrible shit, no doubts. But what I'm talking about is not the white man. I'm talking about just this attitude, like whatever came before us, they did it wrong. We have to redo it.
Is that the attitude?
It's something I'm trying to decipher. I mean, when I look at like even in the political world, the extreme right or the extreme left, they both decided to ignore science now. Like it's like science all of a sudden doesn't matter. Like how did we get there? How do we get to a place where like fact doesn't exist anymore? Like all this stuff. Like if I'm looking at what we're talking about on the micro level of comics and apply it to the macro, it's just stuff that I am really trying to understand in the world today.
That kind of conversation, although I can get into it with you, causes me a level of anxiety.
Yeah.
Only because it has to account for so many different things all at once, all at the same time.
Sure.
So I always sort of like, I don't know, I try to make my, those conversations take me out of the realm of like, I can't begin to understand. I don't have a level of expertise about that. Like,
oh no, I'm a dummy. I mean, make no mistake, I'm a dummy.
Where did we go that suddenly things that are like immediately in front of your eyes, right? Which is, I believe, rarely is something not ever true. Like if I look up at the sky and I say blue, right? Some sort of blue. There's always some dum-dum out there that's going to challenge that just for the sake of challenging.
Right,
and that permeates. I think that kind of knee jerk, or that sort of like, whatever, the new muscle memory that people are like moving themselves into, oftentimes come from like a level of deconstructionism that doesn't really benefit anything.
No, it's not helping anything.
At least nothing. At least not. The exercise allows you to reflect on like, why is that working, or why have things always been like that? And from a concept artist perspective, that's really super helpful, where it's like, we're using all of these ciphers, we're using all of these knee-jerk reactions into things because we need something to register as scary, right? Like one of the things I'm running into recently is like in concept art, we have a shared set of buckets that we defer to in design because it elicits a certain emotion, not because we designed it, but because somebody else has designed it and we're utilizing pieces. Like the xenomorph is a perfect example.
Right.
Where we take nuances of Giger, right, and all the stuff that he had designed previously, and then sort of like fast forward to like right now, we're still using some of those things independent of Giger.
Right.
But people are using it as like Lego pieces because,
Right.
we needed a scary creature. Therefore, what's the last thing that inspired me is scary
Right.
creature. And now there's almost this porting over of a design because nobody can make a fluffy creature look scary. You know what I mean? Like
Sure,
they immediately
sure.
go into these easy
Well,
cycles.
I
Right?
mean, it gets back to what I'm wondering is like, is there a lack of wanting to put in the time and the work, the study, doing the hard stuff to come out the other side with the skill set to not just pull from
This
other
is
people?
this is in part speaks to what you were talking about in the macro, right? When somebody goes in there and goes like, I just want to deconstruct everything. I just want to, blah 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 blah, right? Like, no, there are no adults in the room
Right, well,
that
yeah,
tells them like,
that's for damn
knock
sure.
that off, right?
Mhm.
That's fine and everything, but you're getting to a point now where this, all of your deconstructionism isn't even actionable. It's like
Right.
all of that thinking, all of that brain power, all of those resources. What is it doing to help advance society? And they leverage, the fact that we're doing it helps to advance society. Like, well, not really. Right?
Right.
It advances your ego. It advances the fact that you believe you are so attuned to all of these things that you see as like, oh, we shouldn't default into things, or that's wrong, or blah, or blah. Like, awareness of something is simply not enough. Right? You need to make it actionable in order for actual, real, tangible, usable change to be birthed from that, right? Awareness, that's just like the first step. Oftentimes, people don't have the skill set, the soft skill set of talking to people. Oftentimes, people don't have the soft skill set of like debate and talking, right? To be like, I
Yeah.
want to be able to change your mind about something, and this is my perspective about it. Because nobody is telling them, actually, you have to prove that out. Instead, they're being, it's okay now for just like to yell at the top of your lungs to make an argument so that, the loudest person in the room happens to be right. Or go and be part of your echo chamber that allows you to like, yeah, absolutely, this proves
Right.
out. My thing works. Now, stepping away from that, which is the super macro, and that's just, by the way, that's just very general. The micro is similar in comics because there are no adults in the room.
Right.
Nobody is saying, understand our legacy, understand our business model, understand what got us here, right? And I think in recent times, and by recent is like relative, right? Like in recent times, it's been sort of like, just whomever. I know this person who knows this person who knows this person. Hire them on to draw this really relevant, really super well-known, IP at Marvel or at DC. They tried it. It's amazing. It's proofing itself out to be not viable anymore.
Right.
Which
Right.
all it takes, and here's the hard part, and this is not in totality, but here's the hard lesson that some of these business who are reliant upon a visual medium that allows for experimentation but don't know how to course correct when it doesn't work,
Right.
that ultimately things need to get paid for.
Right.
Right? So all of these advocates, all of these sort of, I keep forgetting the word of like, oh gosh, all these people who are advocates for like, let's do something for the sake of being different, right? Let's do something that breaks up the norm, right? I'm like, dude, I love that because somewhere in there is you're probably going to discover there's value to something. But in comics, regardless of how they've been told, this is not working. We are like bleeding out like you wouldn't believe. Like readership, our numbers, again, that's exclusive because they're doing something wrong.
Well, when you
The
say
world is
we
changing
are,
around them.
it's Marvel and DC that are bleeding out.
Well, that's the thing. It's like to blame simply because they didn't follow didn't follow the legacy and the quote unquote formula. That, by the way, it's transformable, because they didn't understand the business of, like, again, we're talking exclusively art, right? Because they didn't understand that part. I'm a huge advocate of going and pushing against that. Like, hey, we know that we've been doing this historically, but what if there's room here to really transform this, right? And that's the I think the most progressive, beneficial concept, beneficial exercise of, like, trying new things. But at some point, something has to tell you that that's not working. And I don't know if there's enough adults in the room to tell them this isn't working.
Yeah, I don't
Right?
think there is. Yeah.
Let's allow, we have to allow for what is working. And it's not saying in totality, none of it's working. But somebody had to by adults, I mean leadership. Somebody in leadership needs to step in and be like, okay, these, out of the 100 things that we tried, on the 50 things that we tried, 6 of them work. We're going to hold on to that. That actually helps build on our legacy. It actually builds on what good looks like for us.
Right.
And again, exclusively talking art, right? The adults in the room goes, I don't know what I'm talking about, because I handle more administrative. I handle more, the scheduling. I handle more of the behind the scenes stuff when it comes to, like, getting this stuff out to printers on time and taking a look at whether or not the stuff comes back isn't complete trash, Like, the adult in the room would go, I don't know how to do that. We'd better go find somebody who does that.
Right.
Who does know what they're talking about.
Right.
And that's what I mean, going back to, I don't know how long we've been talking now. I think that's, that goes back to what I was talking about when I'm like, I think art in comics is being diminished. And I don't know if it's on purpose or if it's by accident or it's a combination of both. But certainly, if you don't know what you're doing, bring somebody into the room that does know what they're doing.
Right.
Because you cited Mark Chiarello. I know that he was one of the bigger filtering processes when it came to artist acquisition, talent acquisition, when it comes to the visual end. He was one of the critical eyeballs that they put stuff in front of to see whether or not something worked for that thing. I don't know. I would say that maybe a couple of times somebody may have leaned, and I hope this is true, that somebody leaned over to Mark and been like, yo, Canete's looking for work. And I have this thing that's available, and maybe I'll hire him because I kind of like him, and we've had conversations at the bar or whatever it is. I would hope that Mark would be like, don't do that. Don't hire that kid.
No, Mark loves your work.
Because of this thing, because he doesn't fit.
Oh, no.
I hope they don't hire him because you're working on name the big superhero thing, right?
Right.
Don't hire that kid, I would hope that that's true. I had heard behind the scenes way back in the day that of the, I think it's, I want to say like the 3-headed monster that was DC back then. And the 3 of them were like Jim Lee, Dan Didio? How do you pronounce his name? Didio?
I think it's Didio.
And then and Mark Chiarello, who helped to inform on viable talent that they were going to bring on. Again, talent exclusively in this case means like art, right? I knew Jim from way back in the day, in Wildstorm days, so I knew that he had an appreciation. Affinity might be too strong, but an appreciation for my work.
No, Jim. I think Jim really adores your work. I've seen some stuff online that he's commented on, and
yeah, that's really super flattering. And clearly, I have a long time professional relationship with Mark Chiarello, and he always advocates for me for the right fit, for the right project. He keeps me in mind for things. I think the odd person out was Didio.
Yeah.
Right. And in the past, I would react super negatively to that. I'd be like, oh, Dan is, whatever. I'd throw shade his way, right? Nowadays, I go like, there's a value to a guy who raises his concerns because he has a clear / better understanding, better appreciation of the IP, of like what he believes.
But did he?
I listen. I don't know because I
I
don't
think
know
I
him
think
that
that,
well.
that the plummeting sales as he was in charge wouldn't agree with what you're saying. I mean,
Were they plummeting? Are we? Is that
I
definitive?
think DC and Marvel have just been going down slowly for a decade.
I thought that he was. I thought he was at the front end of a handful of super successful things
I
that did
think there were
really
some
well for it.
successes.
There you go.
Yes,
I mean,
like
everything is batting
Batman, like
averages, right? Like you can't
the
expect a guy to hit
Snyder,
a home run.
right? I mean, the Snyder Capullo run on Batman was a big one for them.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was big, but the other stuff they did, I don't know. I always looked at Dan's tastes and what he liked as really awful. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like he understood like what is on brand,
Hmm.
but he was very much like not wanting to bring the 90s and later 80s back to comics.
Sure,
And
sure.
I mean I didn't care for the
Wasn't
stuff
for
he
you.
was a fan of.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
But
so but
I know
I
when
think the point that I'm trying to make is that at the very least, within the context of that, it all kind of tempered each other, right? The three people, Jim and Mark, right, had an
yeah.
clear, an undeniable pedigree in art, right? Like in what looks and feels good. It's tempered by somebody like Dan who comes in and says like, based on what I know, what I like, what I've come to understand, help build the company. These are the things, you know. Sometimes you pass the test, sometimes you go through the gate, sometimes you don't, right? But at the very least, there were people that are keeping an eye on that, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if there are that. I don't know if that same level of pedigree
Oh no.
exists
No, no.
now,
No, no. I don't
right?
think it does. I
And I
don't
think
think it
it's
does at all.
exemplified. It's helped highlighted and made bold in some of the artist choices that end up on these projects, experimental as they may be. Although there are, to be fair, there are plenty where I'm like, wow, that looks and feels really, really good. I can't sing the praises of somebody like a Pepe Larraz enough.
Yeah, I mean there's some beasts out there.
Oh
There's
my gosh, man.
Simone DeMeo is killing it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Um
Like, yeah,
uh
but and that's out of the realm of a typical style, right? Like
right.
what I think is that it helps build on the quality and legacy of what they have. See what I mean? Like nobody's saying go draw more John Byrne. Nobody's saying go
Right,
draw
right.
more
Don't
like
duplicate
Sal
it.
Buscema, right? Like,
Well, and
but
I
at the
think his name
very
is
least,
Javier Fernandez is doing it
sure.
too. He's on Spawn right now. That guy's insane.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it continues to build on the craft, if not necessarily
Hmm.
elevating it, like the quality of it all, right? And the people who hired those, the heads of state that helped hire those guys, bring them on and keep them busy, that needs to be applauded. You know, who had enough sort of like we understand the value of this art. We really do
Sure,
appreciate. We know
sure.
that it helps build on the IP. When when you miss that, or excuse me, when that position is vacant, or nobody has that sort of like insight into what good is, quote unquote, for subjective as it may be, what good is for your IP, you get books that you go like, this should be better. This Marvel is the thing. At least back then, things may have changed. I know they've changed dramatically, but you aspire to those spaces to come and work
Yeah, not
for Marvel
anymore.
offices. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're ending that, we're ending this podcast on a downtrend. Shall we end it on something more positive?
Well, congruent to what we've been talking about, I did want to take a minute because like Neal Adams passed this week,
Yeah, sure.
and I don't like. I just feel like we should do our little part to commemorate the legacy because he did so much.
Absolutely.
He did so much,
Absolutely.
and getting back to the idea that maybe this newer generation of superhero artists doesn't care about what came before them or isn't aware of what came before them. I think it's important to make sure we keep this talk going. Neal Adams, aside from coming into comics and rendering like no one had ever seen before on a
Sure.
level that had never been achieved before, and
Sure.
bringing this a sense of page design that was very fresh and new to the comic book page that went on to inspire the next generation of artists. I mean, without a Neal Adams, you don't have a Bill Sienkiewicz coming in. I mean, Bill came in like really, you could tell Neal was all on him. But aside from all that, the only reason we get our original pages back mailed to us, or nowadays you don't even mail them in, but the only reason you get to keep your original pages and resell them is because of Neal Adams. The only reason we all get these royalty checks, some big, some small, is because of Neal Adams. I mean, he really fought for the creator. So I just feel like it's a responsibility to keep the talk alive. So I just wanted to mention those things.
I mean, it's rare that, and there's like these kinds of big events, most specifically of artists passing. It's rare that I'll involve myself online.
I normally don't, but this was a big one.
It feels so performative. You know what I mean?
Right.
I give myself an opportunity to reflect. I go and take a look at their work and realize, whoa, I took that completely by accident from them because of this or that influence that took from him. You know, it's like I get that. I get that from Neal Adams by proxy because this artist is influenced by him, you know?
Right.
To your point, when Neal Adams came in and introduced a style that was, you know, a bit more involved, a bit more sort of like, whoa, that's going into not just like comic booky, but more like illustrative, right? In exercise and in practice, it opened the doors for more people to come in and be like, oh, that's not a traditional style, but it's still, you know, it still sort of elevates the game, right? It's one more, you know, it sets up another tent pole of a look that we'll allow for, and so on and so forth, you know? So I don't think that concept should be lost to people. And when I like, it's strange, the legacy of the covers that he helped to establish, as far as like cover layout, the stuff that you're like, whoa, that's clearly Neal Adams, you know? And how much people accidentally take from those layouts. Like it you know, it becomes the standardized thing now, and you don't even know where you took it from.
Right.
And then sometimes you go like, oh, that's an accidental homage to a Neal Adams cover, you know?
Right.
That's pretty freaking awesome. Yeah.
So that's a little more positive. Thank you, Neal.
There you go. Thank you, Neal. Rest in peace, buddy.
This is the INKPULP podcast. This is the INKPULP podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.